Hello, everybody. We are transitioning from fiat mining to Bitcoin mining.
Yes. Federal Reserve joke. Federal Reserve.
Yeah,
Nick with the Federal
we
Reserve.
workshopped that one in the back for like 20 minutes. I'm Nick Carter, partner at Castle Island Ventures. With me is Darren Feinstein, the co-founder and chief vision officer of Core Scientific, actually, which is the largest publicly traded miner in the U.S. So we're going to really dig into sort of the state of affairs in mining today. So Darren, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So
Thanks for moderating.
yeah, of course. So let's start with where mining is today. I would say it's sort of a challenging environment for miners. To me, it kind of feels reminiscent of sort of 2018, 2019, where you had sort of difficulty rising up against sort of declining price or a flat price, kind of a double whammy for miners. And then you had a big wave of consolidation. So tell me, does it feel like that today in the Bitcoin mining space?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very accurate depiction of where we are right now, and it is very similar to what happened in 2017 and then 2018 when we hit the bear market and the crypto winter, 18 to 24 months up until the halving event. But that's also occurred almost pre every halving event since 2009. So there were crypto winters all smattered all along the way. In 2018, Core Scientific was birthed in 16, early 17, and our first facility was constructed 17, early 18, pre the 18 crypto winter. That time was very interesting in terms of the first scaled miners sort of having to weather a decreased price event and an increased hash rate, and you saw, as you said, a contraction in the marketplace. The miners that were well funded and had strong balance sheets survived, and then the people that built infrastructure that was able to withstand the tumultuous period, they survived as well. And so you saw a shakeout, probably 80-90% of the participants in that field at the time, and here we are today again. We had the spike after the halving in 2020, and now we're seeing hash rate at all-time high, somewhere in the, I think, 240 exahash the other day when I looked at it, and so we have a very high, in terms of all-time high level of hash rate, very high, and we have a price. It's hard to say that it's a sell-off or a depressed price, because 2 years ago Bitcoin was trading between $3,000 and $6,000. So we're still 5x trading higher 5x times than we were in 2019 and 2020. And so when you look at the price and you have to decide your capital allocation schedules, you have to always take into account that the price has the history of shooting way up and then falling down, but not as far down as it was previous to the halving event or the hash rate rising or the new equipment coming online, which also coincided with this year's halving. We had new equipment, we had a equipment refresh, we had a halving event, and then we had the hash rate increase, and lots of people entered the space, and some of them will survive and most of them will not. Just pretty much akin to any startup business. You're going to have lots of people enter a space with rapid price increase, and the people that are able to do that in a measured way are going to withstand the turmoil.
So you've been mining in some form or others for about a decade now.
Yeah.
And so you've seen numerous cycles. So is it safe to say you built that understanding into the way you run the business in terms of being prepared for cyclicality?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's a really good question. I started mining about a decade ago in 2012, 13. I was introduced to the Bitcoin network. Early on, I dismissed it, as most people do. If you looked up what the Bitcoin network was in 2011, you saw that people used it to buy drugs on the internet, and it looked like digital video game money. And so I stayed away. My background is I was an accountant and I'm a lawyer, and I have privileged licenses. So when I read those articles, I said, this is probably a technology that I should stay away from. What piqued my interest was the immutability of the ledger, and we're not going to go into accounting, but really at the base, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is an accounting revolution. It's an innovation in accounting. We haven't had an accounting innovation in 700 years. And so the base root foundation of what Bitcoin is this new accounting technology that allows you to immutably store transactions in a rescissionless environment. And so when I realized that the innovation was real, was meaningful, I decided to participate in the network. Unfortunately, it's called mining. What you really are is you're an accountant, or you're time-stamping transactions between two parties. That time-stamping or accounting transaction functionality is the base engine for proof of work, which runs Bitcoin network. And so in 2012 or 13, started mining. What happened back then were there were very poor options to send your equipment globally and in the US. So we would buy equipment in 2012, 13 and send it to data centers across the US. We were in Washington State. We sent some stuff to Georgia. We sent materials to New York and a number of other locations. The problem that we saw from 2012, 13 up until 16 was everybody that we sent our equipment to, they failed. They had massive problems on the infrastructure side, on the software side, on the uptime, on the efficiency side. And so we realized getting to 2016, if we wanted to do this at any type of scale, we would have to build our own enterprise-grade facilities to host this equipment, which is a data center business. People get very confused on what a Bitcoin miner is. It's simply a computer server that lives inside of a data center. Any building that runs computer servers technically is a data center. And so we decided we needed to build an enterprise-grade infrastructure facility. We picked North Carolina. There's a region in North Carolina and some of those other Appalachian states that have lots of excess hydroelectric power. That hydroelectric power was built by the United States government as critical infrastructure in the 40s. The government got together to build the Manhattan Project, and they built massive amounts of renewable energies up in the Appalachian Mountains, which after the project became stranded renewable energies. And so we located the first enterprise-grade facility up in Marble, North Carolina, which is in western North Carolina. And that facility was actually the home of American Thread, which was a manufacturing facility that provided the thread to Levi Strauss, and went out of business during NAFTA. So there was lots of energy up there. Big utility companies were up there providing lots of power, and you saw a lot of American manufacturing jobs went up into the Appalachian Mountains. And in the 2000 era, they enacted NAFTA, which basically shuttered all of these manufacturing facilities. So you saw these communities that had been growing for 20, 30 years decimated, which then later on Obama enacted the Opportunity Zone laws, which were enacted to help bring back these areas that were decimated by NAFTA. But anyway, we were up in the Appalachian Mountain, and that was the first enterprise-grade facility, I think, in America. The facility was about 230,000 square feet on 70 acres up in those mountains. And we did that, and we built that in a manner that we because I had seen the other previous crypto winters, that we built that with enough funds and a good balance sheet to withstand what ultimately became the next crypto winter about 18 months later.
So there's kind of a variety of different models in mining. You have the very asset-light models, which are popular with some of the largest miners out there. And then there's sort of the proprietary mining versus the hosted mining. So you've been pretty deliberate about the way you set it up in terms of not pursuing the asset-light model, in terms of actually building, owning your own data centers. Tell us a little bit about the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, so as I said, from 2012 to 2015, we didn't have the cute terminology, but I guess technically we were asset-light. We would buy the equipment, and then we would send it to a third party to host it. The problem was, if you're not in control of your own destiny, it's a disaster. And so we always found we would purchase the equipment would come in, and then wherever we were sending the equipment to, they wouldn't turn it on in time. The equipment would be turned off most of the time when it should be turned on, so the efficiencies were low. And a host of other problems, and we realized in order to control the economics of our business model, we had to control the infrastructure as well. And so today, you hear a lot of people talk about how they're asset light. They went out and bought some miners, 10,000, 20,000 miners, and they're worth $1 billion. Well, two things are wrong with that. One, the miners are very expensive, so they're not actually asset light. And two, you can't control turning them on and running them properly. And so you have these two business models that one of them is going to withstand the test of time, and the other one will be interesting to see how it plays out this cycle. The last cycle, the asset light model, people didn't survive very well.
Right. So probably the biggest topic in mining today is various forms of backlash at the state and also national level. So just recently, as you know, New York has passed this moratorium on a subset of mining activities. So behind the meter mining with fossil fuel generation hasn't been signed into law yet, but I think it will be. And then also Washington State is hiking taxes. They're putting a tariff on mining activity. You've explored both of those jurisdictions historically. You're active in a bunch of different states. Tell us about how you actually go about determining where to site your operations and your thoughts on the backlash that we're seeing at the state level and how miners can avoid that.
Yeah, good question. The site development, which is where we would categorize that, the site development before you actually start physically building or capital allocating towards a specific region or locality, is an art, and people somehow, and it's surprising to me that the groundwork that you need to do in the site development stage of Bitcoin mining, especially that has such a confusing connotation, is the very first step is to go to that region and talk to the representatives, talk to the elected officials, talk to the community, talk to the development team. There's an array of people that are located in every single city that you're going to ultimately have to birth your company in, and you have to find out if they want you there, right? And if they don't want you there, don't build there. Don't start a project there, because ultimately the elected officials are elected by the people that live there. If the people that live there have elected these officials, they've elected them for several reasons, and you're not going to change the entire makeup of these communities that you're going to move into. So there's a lot of options in America and really friendly jurisdictions that want this technology within its borders, and that understand it, that take the time to understand it, that understand the innovation of this new accounting technology and transaction technology, and understand that the actual energy footprint is not what you hear in the mainstream media, and so they're very willing to accept you into the communities that they're in. And then there are communities that just don't care. They don't want to learn it. They don't need to learn it. And the elected officials and the citizens there don't want you there. And so New York is one of those towns. New York is historically very unfriendly to Bitcoin mining. They're unfriendly to not just Bitcoin mining, but a lot of different industries that they don't want within their borders. And so to try to hammer in a business into a community, especially one that they're not afraid of a fight, is really a silly proposition for a company that has to allocate capital of either their own money, investors' money, or the public's money. It just seems that wouldn't be the best use of your funds. There are plenty of places all over that you can go to. I think the genesis of this was up in Washington State. There's lots of hydroelectric power in Washington State, lots of that stranded renewable energy. They have certain regions that have excess energy, and certain regions have not built out. They haven't built out the transmission lines to get that excess energy down into the areas that need the energy. So you have all types of different regions in Washington State, but early on, Bitcoin mining, 2013, 2014, 2015, moved to Washington State, and I was a customer at one of those co-location facilities way back in the early times. And what happened, as you saw, was the people in Washington State decided they didn't want Bitcoin mining within their borders. They didn't like it. They didn't understand it, but they don't like it. And so the people that were now spending capital in Washington State, they left. And they went to other regions and other areas of the country that welcomed them and welcomed the business. And there's a lot of communities that did that. And the same thing happened in New York, right? The New York people, just like Washington State, didn't want this technology within its borders. And so now we're seeing headlines that New York is banning proof-of-work mining, none of which is true. New York imposed a moratorium, a 2-year moratorium on a certain subset of information, and moratoriums are not unique. They're not unique to New York. They're not unique to the industry. There are moratoriums all over the United States and cities on all types of issues, building apartment complexes, developing near the coast, building billboards, right? Putting in cell towers. Moratoriums are a tool of the regulators to slow down and conduct more studies. And so I don't think anybody should have been surprised. We knew what was going to happen in New York State. We talked to some of the legislators that were up there. I had some calls with their staff just to find out what they were interested in understanding. And they were not interested in understanding the true environmental impact at all. So I knew this was going to be the ultimate decision they were going to make. But the writing's been on the wall for the last 4 or 5 years that New York is an inhospitable environment to technology like we have here.
So you've been an instrumental part of the Bitcoin Mining Council, which is, I think, just over a year old, maybe a year and a quarter old.
Yeah.
And the council lists 50% of Bitcoin's hash rate as contributing to the data sharing as of the last quarterly disclosure.
Yeah, it was amazing. We tried to get Nick involved in the beginning, and he said he would think about it and got more involved as time went on, which we appreciate. But yeah, no, the purpose of the Bitcoin Mining Council solely is to educate the public and the regulators on the true energy footprint of this industry. The problem the industry has is it's very complicated. It's complicated. It's very complicated, but when you think about it for the first time, like I did, it sounds very simplistic. But when you actually research it and learn what it is, it's a massively complicated industry. The infrastructure's very complicated. The equipment that you need to run it is complicated. And then the effects on economics, transactions, and accounting is also very complicated. And then how that affects the rest of the world is even more complicated. So it's a massively complicated system. And to explain that to people in a cohesive manner is very difficult. And so what you had was the whole world united, for the most part, against Bitcoin and against the Bitcoin network, and putting out information that was just patently false, provably false, on what the network was. And then you had 20, 30 people that were in the industry that would put reports out or respond to the comments individually, right? They would respond individually. So you had this group effort against the network, and then you had certain individuals and companies that would come out with one-off pieces against whatever it was. And so you had this very unorganized response to a very organized disinformation campaign. And so the goal of the Bitcoin Mining Council, when Michael Saylor and I and several other people got together, was to help spread the message of truth. What actually are the facts? How much energy is used by this network globally? What is the carbon footprint? Is this something that's going to destroy the planet, as the World Economic Forum said in 2017 in a very famous article that's shared all over the internet? In 2017, the World Economic Forum comically said that by the year 2020, which was 2 years ago, the Bitcoin network, which is so bad for the world, it's so bad for the world that by 2020, the Bitcoin network is going to consume all of the world's energy. All of it's on pace to consume all of it. And so, obviously, that's not true. We have lights on. But when you do the math and you drill down on how wrong they were over 99% wrong. We know anybody can tell you how much energy is generated globally, which you need to understand in order to have a conversation about global energy use. And we know how much energy the Bitcoin mining network uses, and it's 16 basis points of the world's energy. So we're talking 16/100% today. So 2 years after the Armageddon prediction by the World Economic Forum. But anyway, the Bitcoin Mining Council was created to lend a voice to these factual and educational points that really were not getting distributed properly. Michael Saylor had the best quote when he described the Bitcoin Mining Council, because we did take a lot of heat for creating it. He said, that the network and the people that are involved in it, we're all decentralized. We believe in decentralization. The centralization of the record keeping has caused a lot of problems in the world. But he said centralization. We could be decentralized, but we don't need to be disorganized, which is what we were. We were very disorganized, and so we put report together every quarter, as you said. We're about a little over a year, and those reports are amazingly full of information that anybody can download, and you can talk to any of your representatives, and they show just how inconsequential the amount of energy that this network uses, both on a global basis and on a basis in the U.S. And so we encourage anybody to go look at the Bitcoin Mining Council website and take any of that information that you want.
Well, we'll leave it there that time. Darren Feinstein, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.